Hi. So far we have covered the get request, the post request, the put and the delete request. So in this lesson we'll be covering API versioning. Before releasing your REST API, you should also consider how to handle versioning, because you cannot guarantee that all of your users will always use the latest version of the API. For example, imagine that you publish an API in the App Store with an API version 1. In the next release of your API version 2, which will be used in your website, you change one of the URI calls and the response format. So if you do not support versioning, your app will crash until you update your app with a new API version. And that's not a good practice. Now that you know the reason behind the versioning, let's see how it should be done. The most common way of versioning an API is to include the version number in every URI, just like the one we have on the screen. You can see the two URI have a version v1, v2.1, which is the versioning. This way, the structure and the version are correct in the URI, and it is simple to use. The other approach is to include the version in the HTTP header. If you use this approach, you should still be able to handle the request where the version is missing and is not visible in the URI itself. Note, there are other types of approaches where the versioning is optional. And if a version is not specified, it will automatically get the latest version. The drawback of this approach is that the developers should act immediately to update the apps in order not to break the experience. So another way to version your API is to handle each platform separately. So let's say you have Android, web apps and iOS, and they behave differently. You may create different versions for your API to optimize for each platform separately, just like what we have on the screen. So you can see the first API has a version for Android with the A-V4, which is the version number. And we also have the one for iOS and for web apps.